The win wasn't too impressive. The record's not too impressive, but USC, after 8 games with just 4 to play, still very much alive, actually in control of the Pac-12 South Division. USC wins over Colorado in Boulder, the Trojans' first road win of the season, 35-31 over Colorado with a late touchdown with about 2 minutes to play before they got the defensive stop as USC statistically dominated the fourth quarter and again came back to win 35-31 over Colorado. The Buffs now at 3-5 on the season after the loss, and they have lost 3 consecutive games. And for USC, they move it on with a 35-31 win. They're 5-3 now in the Pac-12 and 3-1 in the division, and they own the tiebreaker over Colorado. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I will let you know that I saw the last 6 minutes of game time. Last 6 minutes of game time. So I had some other stuff going on tonight. Did not see the USC-Colorado game. I flipped it on. There was 6 minutes left in the game. USC had just taken over possession of the ball. I understand that Colorado had a bit of a controversial decision to make to whether to try to convert on 4th down and possibly ice the game or punt it away. They punted away to USC, and Keaton Slovis led the Trojans down the field for the game-winning touchdown to Michael Pittman. On a couple of occurrences, it looked as though USC was stopped. They almost turned the ball over a couple times. There was the Slovis fumble that was recovered by one of the offensive linemen. And then there was a bit of a shovel pass, unintentionally, but a shovel pass as Slovis was about to be sacked, which he shoveled off to Stephen Carr, who almost tossed it into the arms of an oncoming defender for the Buffs. So USC avoided disaster twice on the final touchdown series, but capped it off with a Pittman race to the end zone around the corner on the right side, and he dove into the end zone with just about 2 minutes left as USC prevails 35-31 over Colorado. I will head to the live chat to check out the comments, and of course, it was not earlier this afternoon. Was that yesterday? That was yesterday. That was yesterday that we struck up the live stream. Impromptu, just like this. I'm taking a bit of a sabbatical this weekend, so forgive me. My plans are a bit up in the air, and I won't be providing the kind of college football coverage that you're accustomed to for this weekend. But I was able to jump on last minute yesterday for maybe 25 or 30 minutes before I was summoned away. And then the same thing tonight, able to jump on board here. And I'm looking to bring on Matt Lowry from Conquest Chronicles to break down the USC side of this win over Colorado 35-31. So Matt Lowry's coming back home, SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles, and he will be able to set us up on what happened between USC and Colorado as the Trojans, again, in control of the Pac-12 South Division for as ugly as it's been, finally getting a road win near the end of October. It has taken USC to the final weekend of October to finally notch a road win, having lost to BYU on the road, a loss to Notre Dame on the road, of course, last week, close game there, losing to Washington on the road. But USC goes to 5-3, 3-1 in the Pac-12 with a win over Colorado. We, of course, let you know that this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do each and every day. We bring college football coverage like nobody else. So please don't need to subscribe right now. If you're not convinced, check out the videos. 13 previews this week for week 9, 13 last week for week 8. So we do our best to cover the big matchups each and every week from both sides and set you up for each and every college football weekend. And of course, then you can get my predictions by simply grabbing the link in the description section below, which reminds me of something I failed to do. I will need to do it after the live stream. Unfortunately, this is going to cost me a few dollars, but that's fine. I will need to do it now after the live stream. Possibly if Match jumps on, I'll have a chance to do it, but it would just provide dead air for too long, so I don't want to do that to you. We've got the phone lines open. 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. I'll get that up in just a second. I want to remind everyone that the record against the points last week was 14-7. 14-7 against the spread. And had you listened to me last night, I took Houston plus the 13 points. And then tonight it was Colorado plus the 13 points against USC. Therefore, we're off to a rampage of a 2-0 start this weekend. So that is 16-7 now against the spread the last 2 weekends. Go to the description section of any video, grab the link next to Voice of College Football Community. You will be able to do that during the replay of this live stream. You can't do it right now, but during the replay. So go to any video, go to the description section, grab the link next to Voice of College Football Community. You get my exclusive predictions right there. Again, 16-7 against the spread last weekend, going into Saturday's games tomorrow or later today, if you're on the East Coast, here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, let's remind everyone once again, there's the number, 860-325-3687. I'm kind of limited in regards to what I can access here in terms of scores and statistics and information. And also I'm going to have to just rely on what is called StreamYard to check out your comments. Here we go. DeAndre right out of the gate with a super chat. Man, DeAndre gets it. DeAndre and a few of you, I got to say this before we start talking about just college football and stop with the promotions, but realize what we're doing here and what the vision is. If all of you would just contribute just a tiny bit, then I wipe out 50 hours that I devote somewhere else and I really lock into college football. You think that we run a channel now? Wow. DeAndre, thank you so much for the contribution on the super chat. What is good, Mark? Well, college football is good. And tomorrow it's good enough to give us Auburn, LSU, Notre Dame, Michigan, although I question Michigan's motivation. Hopefully it's pride. Hopefully it's a rivalry. But in terms of a tangible goal, accomplishment, what does Michigan have tomorrow? And of course, Ohio State, Wisconsin. Those are three of the big headliners. Here we've got a call coming in.
Call or choose to decline. The call will start at the beep.
Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
What's up, Mark? Man, are you enjoying your sabbatical?
I am. I very much am, believe me. It's been fun.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Well, good job, man. Well, I have much to talk about, man. I'm ready for tomorrow. See Clemson and Boston College at 7:30, and I'll see what happens there. And I think Miami fans think I don't like Miami football, but I love ACC football, and you know that, Mark.
I do.
And I would love to see the ACC do good again, but Miami and Florida State, needs to get better. But I think we need to stop looking for Miami to be better in the ACC. Not because they can't. Those teams that was in Miami, they didn't have to compete with South Florida and Central Florida for talent like they do now. When I say compete, like some guys might say, hey, why do I need to sit on the bench for 2 years before this guy leaves? I'm going to start at Central Florida or South Florida. And I think they wasted their time to think that Miami's going to be back to where they used to be in the 80s, 90s, and 2001. And unfortunately, the biggest problem is their offensive line. I mean, until you improve that, and that's the same thing with Florida State, they're not going to win. And I know I always mention that, but I just love to see Miami fans. They're so passionate, mad when they lose. It's so funny to me. So that's one of the reasons why I like to see them lose, because the reaction shows me crazy.
So DeAndre, when you take Miami and you compare them to everybody else in the country, don't you think this is the most underachieving, most pathetic situation that there is in college football? Again, compared to, now, of course, there are worse teams out there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're the worst team. They're obviously not the worst team in the Power 5 or in the FBS. But in regards to when you take into account the personnel on the roster, the talent on the roster, when you take into consideration what the expectations are, what the history has been, what the tradition has been, and then what the recruiting footprint is right in that state and right in their own backyard, this has to be the most underachieving program in the country.
And I totally agree with you. But Mark, I think we had this conversation last year. Outside of Miami fans, I think most people saw this coming. I didn't see them beat Virginia. I know Virginia played a very sloppy game.
Yeah.
But I had picked Virginia to win the ACC Coastal. And if you, like I said, I don't know if you found it yet, but I also was one of the few people that said I thought USC was going to be much improved. I know they're 3 or 4, but I mean, look who they lost to, and look at the manner they lost to those teams. I mean, they're by like 1 or 2 points. I mean, it's difference. But I think one of the main problems that Miami is having, let the little, the turnover chain was cute 2 years ago, and the rings and shit. You don't got to do that to sell Miami football. Everybody knows who Miami football is. They all over USC. Why do you got to do that? I mean, just play the game. I mean, everybody said, they're like, this is our tradition. You won't do that back in the day. You were just whooping people's butt. You don't got to do that to sell your program anymore. I mean, I know. I think Alabama was the first one I seen carry a championship belt across the thing. That Miami came over with a turnover chain. It was cool. It was fun and unique. They were 10-3 or 10-2 that year that they did that. They got smashed by Clemson. I mean, it was cool. But now just let it go. You score a touchdown, act like you've been there before. You don't need that to sell Miami football. I think that's one of the problems. They working on all these gimmicks. Let's play the game.
Well, that could be. That could be. I just think between Miami and Florida State, they have to be the most underachieving programs in the country. And we saw a USC team tonight that barely could beat Colorado, a team that's been blown out the last 2 weeks by Washington State and by Oregon, 45-3, and USC could barely had to rally in the fourth quarter to beat them. So USC's got a long way to go too. Although, which leads me, DeAndre, because now I get interested in your predictions. Did you have anything on the line tonight or on last night's game? Because I'm off to a great start this weekend. I had a really good weekend last weekend at 14-7 against the spread, and now I'm 2-0, having taken Houston and the 2 touchdowns. And Colorado in the 13 points tonight.
Well, it's East Carolina homecoming weekend, and then also on top of that, my kids have been dragging me. It's Halloween time, so I've been trying to do stuff with the kids. So no, I haven't really had a chance to look at the who's playing and what did I think about who's playing and stuff like that this week. We were in a few weekends. I haven't bet, and matter of fact, all the game that I think that interests me has been Wisconsin, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Kansas State. Those 2 teams interest me in the points and stuff. But I'll be honest with you, I really haven't looked at it more. I mean, I'll be honest. LSU, I'm looking at it now. LSU, Auburn. That's something I'll probably take a look at. I think Auburn has a good chance at with their defensive line there, because pull an upset there. I think negative 10.5 is a lot of points, but I know Auburn hasn't won there in a long, long time. Texas at TCU. That's another one. Let me ask you, Bart, I know we talk about disappointing teams. What about the start that Texas got off to and now their struggles? I mean, they barely beat Kansas.
Yeah, so Texas was supposed to be a challenger, of course, for Oklahoma, and they played, despite losing, they played really well against, at least on offense, against LSU. LSU was certainly the better team, but Texas stayed within 1 or 2 scores, only lost by a touchdown, and had a chance in the last 5 minutes. So once they played that game, I thought, okay, LSU's legit, and Texas is still legit. They were at home. They lost by a touchdown. It was a close game. They didn't take it right down to the very wire, but within the last 5 minutes, they had a chance to win the game. So I thought, okay, Texas is legit. They're a top 10 to 15 team. But ever since then, they didn't look that great against West Virginia, who's not a very good team. They won that game by like 10 points on the road, but it was a very close game. They could have gone either way later. And then you mentioned the Kansas game. They survived. They escaped with a kick with like 15 seconds left at home against Kansas. They beat Oklahoma State by 6. Oklahoma State's a decent team, but again, what are they, a top 40 team? Texas beat them 36-30. So Texas is they're not playing well. They probably played their best game since the LSU game against Oklahoma. But again, it was a bit deceiving in that it was 34-27. They hung in the game. They had a chance, but Oklahoma very much dominated statistically and just had a number of turnovers in the red zone that kept Texas in the game. So Texas, underachieving in my opinion. They're not looking like a top 10 team. They're looking like a top 25 or 30 team.
Now, my next question, I heard a little bit of you and Pinsky and Pete's conversation about Clemson going undefeated, or if they lose one game, they might be left out of the playoffs. I don't think neither one of y'all said that, but I'm just I just do that's what
other people are saying it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Mark. Now, I just said that Ohio State, the schedule is about to change a little bit, and I heard y'all give some respect to Michigan, which I still don't understand. But Ohio State's schedule up to this point, Ohio State and Oklahoma. If you're going to put those schedules by side by side, do you think that their schedule any harder up to this point than Clemson's schedule has been?
Well, to get really technical about it, that's exactly what I'd have to do. I would list out all the, what are we up to? 8 games, 7 games, 7 games as of last weekend. So they both played 7 games, 7-0, 7-0. I would list out the teams, the best to the worst on each, and I'd match them up. So like Texas A&M, I think is the best team Clemson has played, and Ohio State, who's the best team that they've played? Probably Michigan State or Cincinnati, or so. Texas A&M is definitely the best team that either one of them has played. So that goes in Clemson's side. I think Texas A&M is better than anybody Ohio State's played. Same thing. They haven't played anybody out of conference. Yeah, they played UCLA and Houston. So you're right. I don't know why. I think people are deceived by, just because the ACC's down, they're not taking into consideration that Oklahoma didn't play anybody out of conference, and really Ohio State didn't either. Plus, they have yet to play Michigan, Penn State. Well, they got Wisconsin. Once they play Wisconsin, then you'd have to sway the schedule argument back in Ohio State's favor. But as it stands right now, I think you're entirely right, DeAndre. There's really no separation between Ohio State's schedule right now and Clemson's schedule. But Clemson just doesn't have Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan coming up on its schedule, or a Big Ten championship game that's going to be, their ACC title game is not going to be close to what Ohio State would face in the Big Ten championship game.
And then let me ask you this, Rob. Mark. Let's Minnesota beats Wisconsin.
Oh,
and
I tell you.
Minnesota go to play Ohio State.
Yep.
With Minnesota, with their schedule, would they make it?
Why does no one talk about Minnesota? I know why, because we just don't think they're legit. Their best win would be maybe Purdue at this point, Fresno State. Yeah, they haven't beaten anybody really convincingly up until the last couple of weeks. Now they're starting to rack up some more convincing wins. They beat Nebraska by 27. They beat Illinois by 23, which didn't look like a big deal. And then Illinois beat, hung with Michigan and beat Wisconsin. So that looks like a better win for Minnesota. But why does nobody talk about Minnesota? Well, I understand it. Their schedule's backloaded. They still have Iowa, Penn State, and Wisconsin. If they can get through that, we should be judging these teams on what they do, not what their name is. And if Minnesota is 11-1 and goes to a Big Ten championship game and wins, then they should go to the playoff, just like any other one-loss a conference champion will. And certainly if they go undefeated, that should be an absolute no-brainer against that schedule. But think of this, DeAndre. Minnesota has not lost in the Big Ten. Wisconsin has one loss in the Big Ten. So if Wisconsin loses to Ohio State, Minnesota can still lose to Wisconsin and still go to the Big Ten championship game. How about that?
Yeah, that's true. And could they get Penn State at home, an hour on the road?
Yes.
I mean, that's just amazing. And they got Maryland this weekend. I mean, and there's some keys that we're not talking about, but I get tired of the schedule talk because it's not Clemson's job for those other teams to be good in the
Sure.
ACC. All Clemson can do is take care of Clemson. And it hurts my nerves, but at the same time, they play an SEC team, two SEC teams every year. And, you know, they didn't know Tennessee. Nobody knew Tennessee was going to be this bad this year. I don't think anybody saw that coming.
I really don't think they're that bad. They're just not as good as I thought they were going to be. I thought they were a top 15 team, and they're not quite that good. But you're right. You know, when you play South Carolina every year and you basically have to play that game, well, you're at the mercy of South Carolina being, as you know, earlier this decade, South Carolina won 11 games 3 consecutive years and finished in the top 5. And then within a couple of years after that, they were going 3-9. Well, Clemson can't control that. And then on top of that, they go and schedule somebody else, like a Georgia, like an Auburn, like a Texas A&M the last 2 years. So they go out and schedule. Nobody can argue that Clemson goes out and schedules, even with having that South Carolina game, in which if you're Kentucky, for example, Kentucky leans on that Louisville game, and they don't schedule anybody else. They don't schedule another big-time team. The rest of the games are MAC games in Eastern and Western Kentucky, so Kentucky doesn't do it. But Clemson doesn't just rest on the South Carolina game. They go out and schedule somebody else, just like Florida State does. I credit Florida State. They just don't lean on the Florida game. They go out and schedule Alabama or Boise State this year, somebody else. So yeah, we can't fault Clemson.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, if Florida State ever gets back right, think about the schedule they had to play. Well, Miami's good. Then you got Clemson. Then you got Miami or Florida every year. I mean, that's a very hard schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Just depending on how those teams turn out at the end of the year. But I keep trying to tell people, let's let it be decided on the field, and let's see what happens. Because I think Clemson, when they match up against these teams, it's going to be pretty good in the playoffs. If Clemson's lucky enough, if they get there, because hell, we see Clemson lose the Pitt and a couple other teams in weird ways. So let's see what happens.
So DeAndre, you do understand the argument, though, that if we have 2 undefeated teams or 2 one-loss champions, and they're vying for the same spot, the last playoff spot, you have to go to the schedule to see who's played a tougher schedule. So that's not blaming a team, but that's all we have to go by.
But we have Clemson. I'll give you that Ohio State schedule is gonna be tougher, and Alabama's schedule at the end is gonna be tougher. But what I'm saying is, if you line up, who would be the third team? Let's line up Oklahoma and Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me that Oklahoma has played a tougher schedule than Clemson.
No.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. And they're probably three or 4 right there. I don't know what the 15 you would have to pick to line up against Clemson to say, hey, they're gonna.
Well, here's the problem, DeAndre. Who's the second best team Clemson has played or will play this year? Is it Wake Forest,
Nobody.
South Carolina? It's Wake Forest or South Carolina, I guess.
Virginia in the ACC
Well,
championship game.
yeah, the championship game. But Oklahoma's going to have 2 games against Texas. Then they're going to have like an Iowa State and an Oklahoma State. So it's going to be a little bit deeper. Baylor, exactly. So it's going to be a little bit deeper. It's going to be about 5 deep of decent teams. And Clemson's going to be about 2 deep, maybe 3 deep on decent teams. 3 deep, let's say. Texas A&M, Wake, and South Carolina, a championship game, and we're really stretching it there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to find out because there's a lot of football we playing, and there's going to be a couple upsets. And Clemson, like you said, Clemson has the softball road, so we're going to find out. But, you know, another thing, and I'm trying to tell Pete on Bobby Dirk is this on my channel on Nice Guy TV. Let me, I will put it like this. I don't think, if you look at Clemson, and I told Pigskin Pete he stole my stats. If you look at Clemson stats from defense is better than last year's. And then also on top of that, it's to me, it's Trevor Lawrence is the issue. Trevor Lawrence has thrown too many interceptions. I looked at, I've been on that Louisville game, and I looked at how many times Trevor Lawrence turned it over in the end zone, and I don't know what's going on with the young man, but he turns over the ball a lot lately. And I know what I told Bobby Dirk is if you go look at Deshaun Watson's junior year, Deshaun Watson turned over the ball. I don't know if Clemson's not making changes and everybody's figuring them out on offense, and they just think they can out-talent people. But I just think that that's part of the problem right there, is that we don't do much more on offense than what we usually do.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson was playing against a better ACC than Trevor Lawrence is too. And I think he knew that they needed him. Trevor Lawrence, he's got to be thinking, if I manage the game and I take care of the football, nobody's coming close to us. So I may not put 50 points on the board, but I'll put 40 on the board, and we'll beat everyone, 42-10. So it's kind of odd that, we saw the same thing out of Brett Favre late in his career that he. And I'm not making the comparison here because Trevor Lawrence has a lot of football to play and a lot to learn and move along. But it's just odd that a player would gain more reps and should get wiser and their decision-making should improve and it regresses. That's what happened to Brett Favre. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, this is just his second season. But, that he would play that well last year and protect the ball that well and then start to get careless and make bad choices downfield is kind of odd.
Well, yeah, and maybe because he is pressing. Who knows? Maybe they're trying to make that big play. Like I think it's either Ross or Higgins that caught at the end of the end zone. Ain't no way that he should have thrown that pass. I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe he thinks he can just outshine everybody.
I guess.
Or they're so talented they can do it. But I got to take some other calls. But also, Woodrow being gone, maybe they don't have that quick slot guy to make those moves in tight quarters.
True.
Because Overton, who's been playing the slot, is 6'5", and I don't think he's that fast. If Rodgers, he just came back for the knee injury. I know it's been a couple weeks since he's been back. I think he came back to Texas A&M game, but I mean, everybody say, look how fast he recovered, but maybe he's not fully recovered like we like to think he is.
And that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons I thought they were going to get back to the tight end this year is because they lost Renfro, and they used to really use the tight end. 4 or 5 years ago, that they were going to get back to the tight end without having Renfro in the slot.
But see, I'm not going to say I'm like this recruiting guru, but if you think about it, Clemson has not recruited a major tight end. And I think the one that they did recruit, I think he's one of those people that got caught with the PSTD in the system, along with Justin Lawrence. So I think that might be part of the issue, Mark, is that they don't have a legit tight end. But I mean, they know with the Clark, I think he was probably recruited coming out of Texas, because I know they try to get the kid at the time with LSU to come to try to get him to come to Clemson, because that's one of the areas of trouble that it was having. But I you never know. But Mark, enjoy the rest of the show, man. You have a good night. Enjoy your little vacation, and I will catch you tomorrow if you're on. If not, I'll catch you sometime when you come back on.
I think we're going to be able to sneak on at some point, maybe after Ohio State, Wisconsin. DeAndre, thanks for the contribution as always tonight as well. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, Mark. You have a great day, sir.
Our man DeAndre, Mr. Nice Guy. Mr. Nice Guy, got to get used to that handle there. Mr. Nice Guy TV, DeAndre, Clemson fan, a defender of the ACC as well. Dale asked this afternoon, and now I'm going to take a call, and I'm trying to get to Dale's question because he asked this afternoon or yesterday afternoon when I did the live stream, and I want to respect his question because he was the first one online yesterday, and I was on here for like 45 minutes and never got to Dale's question about a number of undefeated teams to make the playoffs. But we'll get to the caller here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4.
There he is. How are you?
I'm doing good. I had to deal with something, so couldn't join right away, but I'm on now. But basically, want to talk about some college football. Not involving my Terps because I think I kind of beat the drum on that during my last call.
Sure.
But one problem I'm having throughout this season, which I think is a big problem, is how these national primetime games and how College Game Day is getting picked and how all these things are getting picked. I think it's a disgrace. You had a top 25 matchup last week that wasn't on national TV. You have a top 10 matchup, and I know College Game Day, they'll say, well, we only did the LSU report. You want to know my response to that? Who the hell cares? Why are they going to in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota? I mean, College Game Day is making my argument about Minnesota look weak because they're thinking that South Dakota State is actually something. I mean, are you kidding me?
Okay, I've got a couple things to say here, McD. Certainly voice your opinion there, and I know a lot of people care what College Game Day chooses each and every week, but point number one is going to be, if you know anything about my background and situation from a work standpoint, from a professional standpoint, you will understand why I'm not going to comment or criticize the selection of College Game Day sites. Number two, I'm fascinated by this. I am fascinated to a certain extent because I think College Game Day is the standard. It's the best, and I just don't say that because of my receiving the paycheck that I do, but I just think it's obvious that it's the best in the business. But I don't watch it. I think you realize I'm up until 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night for a number of reasons, usually talking to all of you and then editing videos. So I haven't watched College Game Day in more than 5 minutes of it in years. I think it's a great show, but it just doesn't do anything for me at this point. It just doesn't, there's nothing that they talk about that I don't already know. So I'm fascinated when people like you and others, and you're not alone, care and have such an investment on where they choose to do their show. It fascinates me that you care that much, and other people do too. Why? Why do you care?
I think it's just part of being the college football nuts that we are.
Sure.
That would be my assessment.
I am too.
I'm not only criticizing College Game Day. I'm criticizing, once again, ESPN. I know you can't comment on that, but I'm also criticizing CBS and Fox, especially Fox. They deserve the most criticism out of all of them. They have this big new kickoff.
Yes.
I don't know. Some of the games they put on there, are you kidding me? I mean, they're going to have Nebraska versus Purdue next week as a big new kickoff game.
Is it really? Is it really?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
Well, McD, you understand there's a pecking order to the game selection by these TV networks.
Correct.
So they all have a contract with various conferences, and ESPN has a contract with everyone. So we see all the conferences on ESPN, but Fox does not have a contract, for example, with the SEC, as you well know, nor the ACC. So they're locked in on the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the Big 10. But there's a selection process. So, for example, ABC/ESPN, and if anybody doesn't recognize that, it's the same company, had its selection of Ohio State, Michigan for years and years and years. I'm talking going back to 1987. Well, Fox took that over a couple of years ago. So that has been their number one selection of a game, number one selection for the year for the last 3 years. And they already have it locked up for this year because it's just, even if Michigan's down, and Ohio State, obviously it's been forever since they've been down, that's still usually the number one rated game of the year. And even if they're down, it's a top 5 rated game. So Fox is locked in on that game, but there's a pecking order to the game. So sometimes the way the schedule sits, there's kind of a weird spot where you would think there would be a good game for a network to select for that time frame, but there's just nothing there. So if you could go through, and you're talking about next week's games, right? Nebraska, Purdue at noon.
I just went through.
Okay.
I just went through it, and
what else would they do? Who else would they get on there?
Michigan, Maryland. I know Birmingham maybe a little bit, but maybe that.
Do we know where that game's going to be?
In college.
Yeah, but where is the game? What network is carrying that game? Do we know?
ABC.
Okay.
ABC.
Well, there's your reason.
I mean, I just want to see the best. I'm going to be honest with you. I like Joe Pratt and I forget the Gus Johnson. I like
Sure.
that broadcasting crew a
Yep.
lot. I just want them to call the best game that they could, because I know Fox is Pac-12, which, by the way, this whole Big Noon kickoff game thing, I mean, you heard that the Pac-12 wanted to move their games to 9 a.m. starts.
Yes.
Maybe that was why. I mean, a bit of a theory right there, but I mean, I just want to see them call the best game, just like I want CBS at the SEC calling the best game. I think Florida, South Carolina, personally, last week was better than LSU, Mississippi State. I would think that game should have been the one. And there was another week that they went with Ole Miss and Alabama when it could have been something else, I think, as well. And then they decided not to go with LSU, the Florida LSU game. They went with Alabama and Texas A&M. So, I mean, I think CBS has some problems. And by the way, the game I was thinking of, I know it turned out to be a similar outcome, but it should have probably been Auburn, Mississippi State during week 5 because of how everything was at week 5. Obviously, we're going to week 9 now, so we all know Mississippi State is not as good as we thought they were going to be. But I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I am very disappointed. It might be because of not how much of it might be because of the 2 byes each team has because of how the calendar lines up the schedule. But I have been very disappointed, and everybody, ESPN, Fox, CBS, especially Fox more than anything.
So McD, understand also, and don't hold me to this 100%, but I'm about 98% certain, and I don't know what the cap is, but that there has to be a certain limit on representations for the teams in a particular conference on that network. For example, Fox can't just throw Ohio State on every week out of the Big 10. They have to, there's like a cap, like maybe 4 times or something like that.
I know for CBS is 5 times per team.
There you go.
I don't know what it is for Fox on top of my head, but I know for CBS is 5 times per game.
Sure.
I mean, per season.
So that's part of it too.
I mean, do you really want to see Ohio State and SAU? I mean, do you want to see Oklahoma, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas Tech? I mean, to me, all they're trying to do there is just throw Oklahoma on the big game of the week, the Big Noon kickoff,
Sure.
wherever they call it. I mean, I refer to the Big Noon kickoff as a bad Burger King promo.
Okay, how did they do this week? How did they do this week, McD? Who's on tomorrow at noon?
I'll
Okay.
give them credit. This
All
week
right.
they did good. And I think, and this week I thought everybody did good, except ESPN for that 7 o'clock slot on the main ESPN channel. I'm not going to get into that, but
Yeah, who is it?
know,
I forget. It is a bad
it's
matchup.
Arkansas and Alabama.
Yes.
I was going to say even though Tua is injured,
So
maybe it'll be
McD.
closer.
So I understand your disappointment with some of the network decisions about these games, but I don't think you can fully criticize it unless you take all the rules and all the contracts and the stipulations, and then you would go week to week and map it out. And also understand the consideration because of that cap, like you mentioned with CBS and 5 games, that they have to look down the road and they have to estimate how good teams are going to be and how good the matchups are going to be down the road, and they've got to play it safe to figure out so they protect themselves late in the season. So keep that in mind. They want good matchups too. Don't you think they want good matchups to get a lot of ratings and make money? They don't want bad matchups.
I'm going to be honest with you. I question that at times.
What else?
I think part of the problem is they announce the schedule 2 weeks in advance. I think that's part of the problem.
Well, they have to for traveling purposes. For, if you're going to the Ohio State-Wisconsin game and you don't know if it's going to be at noon or 3:30 or an 8 p.m. game, you need to know that before Monday of game week. Yeah, they announce it 2 weeks in advance.
Announce it Sunday.
And then maybe somebody loses and it doesn't be. It's less of a matchup, and yeah, they run into that all the time.
I'm just saying they should announce it that Sunday before. I don't know. I think it's a fascinating subject to look into, obviously. But in my opinion, I've just been really disappointed in some of these selections. I thought they were brilliant, better selections in conferences. Obviously Fox are going to have the Red River rivalry or the Red River shootout, whatever they call it these days, and they're going to have the game the last week. They're going to have that, but Texas Tech and Oklahoma. Are you kidding me?
Okay, McD, I think we get your point. I appreciate it. I agree with you. It's a fascinating subject. It's something that I would dive into if I had more freedom there, and I would dive into it having done some research to gather all the stipulations and all the contracts, and then map it out to see where did they not hit it, where did they misstep and screw themselves and screw us as the viewer in regards to their selections. You're right. They miss it sometimes. But that's all
I really want to call that. I know you're limited now, so I just wanted to voice some of my frustration with it. I know you're limited and can only comment on it so much, but thanks for taking my call, Mark. Go Terps, and Minnesota's not going to be rowing that boat tomorrow. They know when it's going to pull off the upset.
Okay.
Go Terps.
Plus the 17. All right, McD. Our man McD Sports. Still riding his Terps as they take on Minnesota as a 17-point underdog. All right, I want to get to this question by Dale. So how many undefeated teams make the playoffs? 1, 2, 3, or 4? So right now we could have Alabama/LSU in the SEC, Clemson in the ACC, Ohio State, Oklahoma. We could have the 4 conferences other than the Pac-12 represented by undefeated teams. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't, because we have a number of factors involved, namely upsets. Ohio State still has to play Penn State, and let's not forget Penn State or Minnesota. They could be undefeated representing the Big Ten. Ohio State would be the most likely there, of course. Clemson, I believe, is going to finish undefeated, as I predicted them to at the beginning of the season. I do not think that the SEC is going to produce an undefeated team. I will say there are going to be 2 undefeated teams. That is my estimation right now, Dale. I would go with Clemson and either Oklahoma or Ohio State. And if you held the proverbial gun to my head, well, if you held the proverbial gun to my head, I wouldn't care. But if you did actually hold a gun to my head, Ohio State's better than Oklahoma, I think, but Oklahoma has an easier schedule. I would say Oklahoma's a better chance of going undefeated than Ohio State. So let's say Oklahoma and Clemson go undefeated. So you got 2 undefeated teams in the playoffs. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Eli.
Eli, what's going on?
Nothing. What's going on with you?
Not too much. Just having myself a nice weekend and took in the last part of the USC win over Colorado and talking a little college football with you.
All right. So, Mark, one of the things I was wondering is, like, when they come up with, like, the whole group of 5 versus power 5, one of the things I mentioned is that I really think the line is completely drawn incorrectly. Like,
Okay.
because if you think about the American and the Mountain West conferences, they're not group of 5 conferences; they're Power 5, in my opinion.
How so?
Well, because let's compare them to the ACC. Like, personally, I actually think the American's probably better than the ACC at this point, and the Mountain West is probably on par with it. And if you look at out of conference records, like, the ACC was a pathetic 3-8 against the Power 5. The Mountain West was 9-10. The American was 6-12. So they both had better non-conference records against the Power 5 than the ACC.
Okay, so I certainly I think you've got a valid argument. I don't think you're correct, but I think it's valid. It's worth debating, is what I'm saying. I think you have some valid points here. So we matched up the American in the ACC a couple weeks ago because somebody brought that to our attention, and I looked at it. I still think that the ACC is better than the American, but I don't think it's by much. So the issue is at the top end. So yes, there are tons of teams in the American Conference and the Mountain West, Eli, that we would both agree are better than the lower tiers of any of the Power 5, especially the ACC and the Big 12 and some in the Big 10. Obviously Rutgers and Illinois is usually awful. They might be a little bit better this year, and Northwestern's really bad this year, and Indiana and Maryland have been poor programs. Kansas, obviously, an easy one to pick off in the Big 12. Oregon State has been atrocious for several years, and the SEC really doesn't produce a bad team, although Arkansas in the last couple of years. Vanderbilt. Although, again, is Vanderbilt that bad? They just beat Missouri, and they went to a bowl game last year and played Baylor within a touchdown. I don't know that Vandy's – and I tend not to get hung up on one season. So when you make that comparison between, let's say, the American and the ACC, yes, when we catch the ACC on a downturn for 1 or 2 years, yeah, there's an argument there. But is that going to last over a long period of time? The ACC just in 2016 went 10-3 in postseason play, produced the national champion, produced a Florida State team that finished in the top 10 with a major bowl win, and produced other teams that had fairly significant bowl wins and went 10-3 in postseason play. So in any given year, there's an opportunity to make the argument that you're making. But I think the issue is with the Mountain West and the American is you don't have the teams to challenge Ohio State and Wisconsin and Penn State in the Big Ten, or Clemson, well, just Clemson in the ACC. But the upper echelon, there's not an upper echelon there that could compete with the Power 5 at the top end. Now, the conferences are very deep, and I'll let you talk here. The conferences are very deep in the Mountain West and the American. So give us your top 5 in the American and your top 5 in the ACC.
Okay, SMU would be number 1.
Okay.
And then number 2, I would say probably I'm gonna say Memphis. It's a toss-up between Memphis and Cincinnati.
Okay.
So I'll say Memphis number 2, Cincinnati number 3, but it could go either way.
Okay.
Number 4 would be UCF, and number 5. I'm trying to remember who I had as number 5. Oh, Temple.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So the comparison between Clemson and SMU is not a comparison. You agree with that? Okay, so we throw that out. ACC blasts them in every conceivable way. It's not even close. You got maybe the best team in the country, certainly one of the top 5 against a team that's like a fringe top 25 team. Okay.
Yeah.
After that, you've got some good comparisons, but let's also keep in mind that Memphis is roughly as good as they've been in recent years. They lost to Wake Forest a couple of years ago in a bowl game. And Virginia Tech just beat Cincinnati. Cincinnati was an 11-2 team, and they barely in the last few seconds beat Virginia Tech, who lost 7 games. And Pitt just beat UCF this year. So those were all competitive situations, but you had mid-tier ACC teams beating the teams that you're talking about.
Yeah, but except for the UCF Pitt game, those weren't this year.
Yeah, they were last year. Or the year before.
Well, like I would
they were
say,
last year.
I mean, because Memphis and Cincinnati are the teams I'd say are pretty much touch and go for 2 and 3, and I would say the same thing about Wake Forest and UVA and ACC. That's pretty much a toss-up for number 2 and 3, and I'd probably take Memphis and Cincinnati over Virginia and Wake Forest.
So you're 2 through 5 again in the ACC?
Yeah, so that'd be 2 out of 3, and then, well, I guess Pitt did beat UCF, so we'll give that one to Pitt. So I'd say Pitt's probably the 4th best team in the ACC.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And then who would be number 5 in the ACC? I don't even know. After like the top 3 or 4, it's just a jumbled up mess.
It is a jumbled up mess. It's even a jumbled up mess after 2. Wake Forest lost to Louisville.
Wake Forest and Virginia is a toss-up.
Yes, and Virginia just lost to Miami, and Wake Forest just lost to Louisville. I think you've got a great argument. You really do. I find it difficult. How have those teams competed? Let's look at those teams competing outside their conferences. So, of course, Cincinnati got annihilated by Ohio State, but maybe Ohio State's a bit of an aberration. They're just so good. Other than that,
anyone but Clemson.
Yeah. So, other than that, Memphis beat Ole Miss, but it was a close game. So, you're talking about one of the worst teams in the SEC, and it was a close game. Memphis certainly was the better team. I think it was 15-10. Temple beat Maryland, but you're talking about, again, a bottom 3 to 4 team in the Big Ten. Temple won that game, 23-20 or something like that. Who else do we have? We've got SMU, obviously, beat TCU. It's a nice win.
Yeah.
TCU's not great this year, but they're still a mid-tier Big 12 team this year.
Yeah.
Who else do we have out of that bunch? Of course, the UCF Pitt game, and UCF beat Stanford easily.
Yeah.
Stanford not great, but they beat Washington this year. They're still capable. They're still a bowl team, a fringe bowl team.
Yeah.
Anybody else worth talking about in the American before we move to the ACC?
Tulane's a pretty decent team.
Okay. Who did they play?
Pretty decent.
Did they play anybody out of conference that's in the Power 5? I don't think they did they? Oh, they played two. They played Auburn.
A good group of 5 teams.
They played Auburn.
Oh yeah, Auburn.
And they actually didn't get killed. I watched a lot of that game, and they actually played okay.
Yeah.
I think the final was like 31-6, but it's like 17-6 for a long time. So they played fairly well. So let's turn to the ACC. So again, Clemson's better than anyone by far. And there's no question that they'll most likely beat South Carolina by a few touchdowns, and they did the same to Texas A&M. Besides them, Wake beat Utah State by a field goal at home. Barely beat them. Florida State lost to Boise State.
Florida State's mediocre.
Miami lost to Florida. Barely beat Central Michigan. Virginia Who was their big out-of-conference game was Notre Dame. They lost by a couple touchdowns.
Yeah.
Pitt, of course, beat UCF.
Pitt beat UCF.
Lost to Penn State, respectable effort there, 17-10.
Yeah.
So that chalked that up for the ACC as being a good showing from Pitt. Duke. Oh, shoot. Duke. Oh, well, they played Alabama. They got annihilated.
Yeah, but everyone gets killed by them.
They do. But Duke might be representing the Coastal Division. It's possible. They're certainly in the running. And that will be their non-conference game, getting killed by Alabama.
Yeah. Right.
Who else do we have? We've got North Carolina beat South Carolina. North Carolina. I was mentioning their win against South Carolina. But they lost to App State.
And then Georgia Tech lost to Temple and an FCS team.
Yes, they beat South Florida. Virginia Tech really played no one. Furman, Old Dominion, whoever. So I think they've got Notre Dame coming. We've got Louisville losing to Notre Dame. We've got NC State losing to West Virginia. We've got Syracuse getting annihilated by Maryland. We have Boston College losing to Kansas by 24 points. So, yes, it is not a good showing by the ACC. And I ran through the conferences about 3 weeks ago after most of the non-conference games were over in September. And I flat out said that the ACC is atrocious. It's just when you take a BC who could go 7-5 again, as they typically do, and you point to their non-conference game being against Kansas and losing by 24 points to Kansas. And there's a ton of those examples. West Virginia looked like garbage until they met NC State, and they won by 17 points. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
But I guess one argument I could make is that if we're even making a legitimate comparison between the American Athletic and Mountain West and the ACC, then in that case, either the ACC should be promoted to Group of Five, or they should be considered power conferences, because there's not enough of a difference. Like, let's say you compare the Mountain West to, say, the Sun Belt Conference USA or MAC. There's a huge difference between them. Huge. I mean, those three conferences I mentioned, they are group conferences. I mean, the Sun Belt has App State and maybe Louisiana Lafayette, and Georgia State, but that's about it. Conference USA. And the MAC is almost like a glorified FCS conference.
Well, as you know, Eli, the good comparison there with the Mountain West is, of course, against the Pac-12. Not that it's as good as the Pac-12, but they play the Pac-12 a ton.
And they were 4-4 this year.
And they played pretty well. Okay. There you go, 4-4. So what were those games? Air Force beat Colorado.
Hawaii over Arizona and Oregon State.
Yep. Well, okay. Go ahead.
And then I forget what the other one.
Air Force beat Colorado.
Yeah, we already mentioned that. I forget what the other one was. I know they beat some other ones. Like
San Diego State always plays somebody. San Diego State always plays somebody. Who did they play?
Beat UCLA.
They beat UCLA. And USC beat Fresno State.
Yeah.
And what else did we have?
We had the bottom teams, UNLV and San Jose State, beating Vanderbilt and Arkansas. I know it's SEC, but still, kind of the bottom.
Sure.
The bottom of the Mountain West versus the bottom of the SEC.
Yep. Wyoming beat Missouri.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It's huge.
And of course, you already mentioned Boise State over Florida State.
Yeah, it's a good showing. It's a really good showing.
I mean, so I guess that's so my argument is make it Power 7 and Group of 3. And then one last thing a couple of things I want to make. One thing is that I thought about what the playoffs should be, and I think my ideal model would be a 12-team playoff where all the Group of 7 champions get an automatic bid, and the best Group of 3 champion plus 4 at-larges.
All right, run that by me again. You got a 12-team playoff, and who gets buys in this thing?
The top 4 get a bye.
Okay, I hate buys. So I'm always going to argue that. The reason I hate the buys is that I think we would have just as much controversy deciding who gets a bye. So, for example, if we went through the playoff era from 2014 through 18, and you said there's going to be a 6-team playoff, as many people like a 6-team playoff, or you're 12, I would be able to refute any type of bye system. I would be able to tell you how it's indistinguishable who gets a bye and who does not get a bye, that it would not be clear-cut in any way. It's just, it's not fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I guess you could say the same for the at-large selections, but then I guess unless they're an independent, they could say, well, they're in the at-larges because they didn't win their conference.
So if you went to a 12-team and you had 6 conferences, then you could give those buys. Well, you would need 8 conferences, or you would need 4 conferences to give the buys to, as the conference champion.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it would be just like the kind of the 14 playoff, except instead of only 4 teams in the playoff, 4 teams get a bye, and the other 8 have to play the first weekend.
So I'm a big 16-team playoff guy if the group of 5's included. If not, then you let them play their own championship and you go with 8 teams out of the Power 5.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't argue against it. I mean, because if you have like the 8-team model, which a lot of people have said have like the Power 5 champions plus the group of 5 champion, the 2 at-larges, then what would happen is that teams like App State could go undefeated and get shut out because it would almost always either be the Mountain West or the American champion. So those 3 conferences would feel the same effects that the American and Mountain West now feel.
All right. Good stuff. Anything else we need to cover?
Just one more thing. So Liberty and Rutgers are playing tomorrow. You think Liberty wins that game?
I know that Liberty opened as a 7-point favorite, which is just mind-boggling to think that there's a team in the Big Ten that would be a full touchdown underdog to a team that's basically a low group of 5 team.
Yeah.
But that's the way it looks.
Well, I mean, Rutgers has just been awful. I mean, their only win was against the horrible UMass team.
Absolutely. So I can't really give you much of a guess on this one because I'm watching the best teams play, and I've just looked at the Rutgers box scores. One of my favorite stats this year is that in losing to Indiana 35-0, that they completed 5 of 13 passes for 1 yard. That was their passing output for the game. Their leading receiver in that game had 3 receptions for 4 yards.
Yeah, so it just shows how they have no passing game at all.
And the other 3 guys that caught passes, or the other 2 guys, had negative yards. It's pathetic. The last I checked, they had 4 touchdowns and 20 interceptions this year.
Man, that's awful.
Yeah, it's incredibly awful.
I mean, they've only played like one low-level team. I mean, Indiana and Maryland are nothing special, though. And I'd say they're kind of in the land of mediocrity. Maybe Indiana a little above, Maryland a little below, and they got blown out by both teams. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see who their new coach is. I mean, Chris Ash did an absolutely horrendous job there.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising based on his work at Ohio State, and you would think he would have been able to go there and recruit some New Jersey talent. Yeah. Well, anyways, I guess I'm about done. Thanks for taking my call. Thanks, Eli. Appreciate the support. Have a good one. Bye. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Mineral Tim 79 is very concerned with what I'm eating and drinking these days. Well, tonight, let's see. What did I have tonight? So we had a little bit of a movie night, TV night, watch the World Series, that sort of thing. And so there was a lot of snacking tonight. was a lot of snacking tonight. I tried some food today that I had never eaten before. I'm not going to go into that right now. But if you're concerned with what I'm eating and drinking, I consume so much water. And for those of you that are very concerned about my sleeping habits, and you're right, I don't sleep nearly enough. You know, I go ninth and sleep 2 hours because I'm doing this all the time. But I just had my health screening, and it was off the charts, incredibly good. My cholesterol counts were all rock bottom, even though I'm eating like this, I'm eating like this, and you know, all this. Drink a lot of water. And I read recently that eating 3 eggs per day is good for you as well. But tons of water. And except for football season, it's difficult to get my exercise during football season. But most of the time, most of the year, I'm exercising every day. So thanks for your concern. I didn't say the Pac-12 is better than the SEC. I said the Pac-12 is the toughest conference to win in. Okay, I'm not going to get into these particular arguments. Cincinnati is better than Texas A&M. Cincinnati is ranked. A&M is not. Okay, if Cincinnati and Texas A&M, Eli, and I know that we just got off the line, were to play tomorrow at a neutral site, sign me up for Texas A&M winning that game. Eli was on a rampage here. Daniel, in the last few years, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia have all gone undefeated unless they played each other in the regular season. Or if they had a fluke game like Purdue, they're going to steamroll. It is time to put start putting group of 5 teams into the playoff. Well, Eli, I would say that there needs to be a distinction made. There, instead of having this fantasy world, this smoke and mirrors, it's really a farce that the group of 5 actually is a competitor, that they're actually included in this process. They're not included in the process. The group of 5 has produced 2 undefeated teams the last 2 years. And those teams have not been allowed to play in the playoff. So what else are they supposed to do? They're not included. So it's a farce to tell the group of 5 that they're included. Don't even. It's even a slight. It's even an insult to the group of 5 to even put them in the college football playoff rankings. They shouldn't even be in the college football playoff rankings because it's an insult to say, oh, you're undefeated team, they're number 9. And you've got some one-loss teams, and we're going to put them at 16 or 20. And I'm not saying that the teams are better than that. I'm just saying it's a farce to include group of 5 teams in the college football playoff rankings, but do not consider them for the playoffs. Okay? So either we need to include them legitimately or exclude them technically, systematically, structurally exclude them and just build a Power 5 playoff system. One or the other. The farce of claiming that the group of 5 are being considered is exactly that. It's just a farce. All right, Mineral Tim 79. I think I've included this, hopefully, and this has been something that I have addressed a number of times and have clearly explained why a 6-team playoff does not work. And I don't know if it was McD Sports 4, I think it was, who tried to argue with me about 6 teams in the playoffs, and we got him set on the straight and narrow that 6 teams does not work. We will have just as much controversy trying to determine the teams that get the buys. We could go through any playoff year or the BCS era before that, and I could clearly, if you can select for me the 6 teams that would make the playoff, I could clearly explain to you why it would be impossible to fairly determine the 2 that get buys. It would be impossible. USC is the only Power 5 school who isn't afraid to schedule tough opponents. Notre Dame every year, Texas back-to-back, Alabama a few years ago, Ohio State. Daniel also considered that Stanford certainly has what I consider to be the toughest non-conference schedule in the country this year in many years. Notre Dame, UCF, Northwestern, who was coming off a Big Ten championship game appearance. All right, I've got to catch up in the live chat here. I am way behind. Herman Lynn says it all right there. We've got 42 on the line right now. We probably had a couple hundred come through the live stream at some point in the last hour. So please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. That's how you can help us build the channel and keep the content coming your way. We need your contribution. We need your help and support. Like the videos, comment on the videos, not just here in the live chat, but also in the various video posts. Comment to the videos. That helps us as well. And then also share the videos out there on social media. Let people know we're here. We are here covering college football like nobody else. And also let people know that that they should come and subscribe. Absolutely. Corey, Mark, does USC need to fire Clay Helton? USC currently is 5-3. They're in first place in the Pac-12 South Division. If I was running USC's athletic department, and let's say they finish the year out as expected, which I think is 7-5, which would mean that they would lose two other Pac-12 games. And let's say they play 6-3 football. So they're 3-1 right now in the Pac-12. So yeah, they lose two other games. They go 6-3 in the Pac-12, which most likely is going to have them sitting at home for the Pac-12 championship game because Utah's played many of its toughest games already. But let's say they tie Utah and they get to the Pac-12 championship game. This USC team could be 7-5 and then 8-5 and be Pac-12 champions. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Oregon's too good, and I think Utah is probably going to win out after USC loses to Oregon. But right now, they control their own destiny. Are those standards? Are those results meeting USC standards? No. But I would find it very difficult to fire Clay Helton coming off an 8-5, 9-4 kind of season after they just went 5-7, considering they've lost two quarterbacks and may make it to a Pac-12 championship game. But I would certainly put him on notice. Next year, we need to win big. We need to win the Pac-12 championship. And if we don't win the Pac-12 championship, it's because somebody is just so good. Like we went 11-2, but lost to Oregon, who was 12-1 in the Pac-12 championship game. That type of season for USC, a fringe top 10 challenge for the college football playoff, challenge or win the Pac-12 type of season for USC. That's what I would determine Clay Helton to need to prove and show me in 2020. And let's say they go 9-4, but there are mitigating circumstances involving injuries, and they just played extremely well in those four losses. There would be a possibility that I would keep Clay Helton, but I would basically state to him, these are my parameters for next season, 2020. You need to win double digits. You need to be a fringe top 10 team. You need to seriously compete for a college football playoff and a Pac-12 championship. That would be my criteria for Clay Helton in 2020, unless USC caves in November and they finish 5-7 this year or 6-6. Then I may pull the trigger this year. I would pull the trigger this year. If they don't compete down the stretch, I don't consider what we saw tonight against Colorado to be a good win for USC. Having to come back in the final 2 minutes of the game to beat Colorado on the road, a team that just lost to Washington State by 31 points, that just lost to Oregon by 42 points. I know that there's a lot of credit given to USC tonight for winning that game on the road, depleted roster, short week. Okay. Yes, they won the game, and it's difficult to win in college football on the road. I get it, but you're playing the second worst team, second to third worst team in the conference, and you're needing to score with 2 minutes left to beat them 35-31? No. You haven't won a road game until the final week of October. No. Bis Coloco, whatever all those letters add up to, his ACC from first to last. Clemson, Virginia, Wake, Pitt, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, BC, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, NC State, Georgia, NC State, Syracuse, Georgia Tech. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then he's got Miami between Florida State and Duke. Florida State, Miami, Duke. Once you get past Clemson and have Georgia Tech at the bottom, if they're still at the bottom, you could throw those teams out there almost any possible way at this point. But I do think Virginia is the second best team, and I think Wake's right there. But, man, that is an indictment against the ACC to consider that Virginia, Wake, Pitt, those type teams are the second best. They are vying for status as the second best team in the conference. Pitt, Wake, Virginia, Pitt, Wake, I repeat, Pitt, Wake, and Virginia are the second best teams in your conference. Compare that to the SEC. Who are the second through fourth best teams? Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Auburn. The Big Ten, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, even the Big 12, Texas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Baylor, the Pac-12, Utah, USC, Washington State. It's just a bad look for this conference. It's awful. And they are in a recruiting hotbed for the most part. 2/3 to 3/4 of the ACC are in a great place from a recruiting standpoint. Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, the DC area, Maryland, good football playing areas. What is wrong with the ACC? Is the ACC better than the Pac-12? No. Cookie dough has eggs in it. Matthew, I've eaten so much cookie dough in my life you would not believe. Dale, Mark, how much time do you spend editing? So what I do, you guys see me on live streams throughout the week, and obviously that involves no editing. Other than that, you see all these matchups, all these previews, game matchups that I produce every week. That requires some editing. Is it high level, difficult editing? No, but it's somewhat time consuming because I'll have a conversation with a Steve Diggs of Michigan Podcast, for example. Steve and I will come on here and we'll talk for 20, 25 minutes. And then at the end, let's say he covers 3 subjects. He talked about the Michigan quarterback battle, and he talked recruiting. Then he talked about Harbaugh. And I want to divide that into 3 separate segments. Take some editing. And if the particular guest that I have on, their audio is not good, then I need to raise the audio and lift out the audio and even it out. I got some editing to do. Yes, it takes time. It takes quite a bit of time. But it's not high-level hours and hours of editing. But when you produce the videos, number of videos that I do, which is about 120 to 150 per month, takes time. Clemson alum 98, thank you, sir. Mark has already explained in detail why 8 is the path forward. Clemson alum 98, thank you, man. Okay, we appreciate the comment as always. 4 teams is plenty. It was created because we had 3 teams that went undefeated, one of which was Auburn, and Auburn got left out. Okay, maybe that's why it was created. I don't agree with that. It had more to do with money. Okay, we have 5 conferences. So I said from the day it was announced, this is a faulty, flawed system. We have 5 conferences. These top teams from each conference rarely play each other. They rarely play the top teams in the other conferences. Therefore, what are we comparing? We are comparing, as it turns out, the top teams in every conference, Ohio State and Oklahoma and Clemson and Alabama and Georgia and let's say Washington or whoever emerges as the best teams in the Pac-12 from year to year. We're comparing them against each other, and we've got nothing to use. We've got no type of non-conference balanced, equitable scheduling to compare them. So when teams then lose as conference champions within their own conference, does that tell us that the conference is actually better than we thought? Or you can play that either way. Okay. So when a Clemson dominates the ACC, we could say, well, Clemson is that good. Or we could say the conference is awful. Or if Clemson would win the ACC and only be 9-3, 10-2, we would leave them out of the playoff. But maybe the league's that good that they beat each other that many times. But man, let's take the best teams in every conference. The teams that are playing really good football, like 0-loss to 1-loss football right now. Clemson, Ohio State, Penn State, even Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Auburn, Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Baylor, Texas to a certain degree, Oregon, even Washington State. I know the Huskies have 3 losses. Utah. Let's take those teams for a second. How many of them have played anybody? Alabama didn't play anyone. LSU played Texas. Florida didn't play anyone. And I'm not saying that they didn't play anybody any good, but they didn't play any of the top 3 to 4 teams in the other conferences. None of those teams are playing. Who did Wisconsin play? Nobody. Who did Ohio State play? Nobody. Who did Michigan play? Well, they're playing Notre Dame tomorrow. Who did Penn State play? Nobody. Who did Clemson play? Nobody. And again, I think Texas A&M's a good game, a good win, but in terms of the top 3 to 4 teams in the Power 5 playing each other, those games basically don't exist. Auburn, Oregon, I'll give you that. LSU, Texas, I'll give you that. That's it. Georgia, Notre Dame, Michigan, Notre Dame. 4 games out of all those teams. We're talking 3 to 4 teams per conference. So that's about 15 to 20 teams. They play 4 non-conference games in most scenarios, or 3. And we only had 4 top games. We only had 4 times where their top-level teams playing each other. Notre Dame, Michigan tomorrow. Notre Dame, Georgia. Texas LSU, Auburn, Oregon. Washington didn't play any of those teams. Washington State didn't play any of those teams. Oregon played Auburn. USC didn't play any of those teams, and they're out of it. So I shouldn't include them. Utah didn't play anyone. Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, on and on. Clemson, Alabama, Florida. You see my point? They're not playing each other. And then we're supposed to evaluate them. This is the reason why we need better scheduling, which I have outlined a number of times how to do it. Equitable scheduling. And number two, you have to have a playoff with at least 5 spots because you have 5 conferences. There was a year in 2011 where Wisconsin lost 2 games. They, of course, were not even considered for the playoff, which at the time was the BCS championship game. Rightfully so. They lost 2 games, and we had a 0-loss LSU team and a 1-loss Oklahoma State and a 1-loss Alabama. So I understand why Wisconsin was not considered. But consider this. Wisconsin lost 2 games. Who did they lose to? They lost to Michigan State on a Hail Mary play. They lost to Ohio State on a Hail Mary play. Both of those games on the road on the last play of the game. So nobody outside the Big Ten in that season proved that they were better on a field than Wisconsin. So was the Big Ten just that good? There should be representation of every league, I believe. App State should get rewarded for good out-of-conference play. If they win them all, I think they should be considered. UCF, on the other hand, should not. So App State this season played North Carolina. Anybody else that they're playing? They played Penn State last year. And keep in mind, everyone, there is the number 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687 back. And unfortunately, when I do that, when I go to select another graphic and put it on the screen, then I lose track in the comments and I can only go back so far. So keep that in mind. If you think you had a great comment, or for many of you who have contributed to the channel through the super chat and I failed to get your comment or your recognition for the super chat on the screen, I apologize. What I'm going to do, that is not intentional. I appreciate your super chat contributions more than you will ever know. So that is not intentional. It's because I have an application that I'm running that is not YouTube. I run this off of StreamYard, which allows me to run these comments and put them on the screen. But I have certain limitations. I can only grab so many comments, and I can't go back in the chat and grab other comments. So please understand that. I get criticized on a regular basis for not putting certain comments on the live chat, like I'm trying to avoid that, or that I'm not going to give credit to people that are contributing to the channel. That is the furthest thing from the truth. I just greatly appreciate it for anybody to reach into their pocket and say, here's a buck, Mark. But man, we just passed 15,000 subscribers the other day. So thank you, 15,000 subscribers. Man, I just think all the time, the 50 hours that I put into a job, can you imagine what this channel would look like if I took that 50 hours and bam, brought it here? Wow, we will have a college football channel that will be stellar. All right, let's get to more comments. If there's anything here to go to. Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. He gets too much crap as Michigan head coach. He is in arguably the toughest subdivision in all of NCAA. Should we really expect 11-1 or 12-0 out of Michigan? Well, there is a team in that division, Daniel, who does produce that record every year. And Jim Harbaugh is being paid as an elite head coach to win championships. So, yes, we should expect that. If Jim Harbaugh was being paid top 25 money, then that's a different situation. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I'm not being completely accurate here, but I'm just making a point. If the best coach in America or the highest paid coach in America makes $10 million, and let's say the top 10 coaches make all over $8 million, and I say, Jim Harbaugh, come to Michigan, we're going to pay you $3 million a year. You are the 37th highest paid head coach in college football. Then that's what he should be expected to produce. But Jim Harbaugh is being paid top 3 money in college football. He's being paid Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher, Dabo Swinney money. So produce a championship. Mark Richt was fired at Georgia, winning 10 games a year. Les Miles at LSU, churning out top 15 finishes. So on one hand, you would think, are they doing their job? Yeah, they're reasonably doing a good job. They're finishing in the top 10 to 15 in the nation. They're going 9-3, even especially Mark Richt. Now, Les Miles, there were a lot of 8 and 4s in there, but Mark Richt especially, 10-2, 9-3, 11-1, all the time. But they were both being paid to win championships. They were being paid in the top 5 in the nation. And for Les Miles, it was 2016 or 17? 2016 when he was fired. They hadn't competed for anything in 5 years. For Mark Richt, they had the big run in 2012. And of course, this was 2016. So he was about 3 to 4 years removed from really winning much of anything. Where are we? I will remind you that the super chat is on. La Potentia, what did you think of Zach Greinke's performance tonight, Mark? I thought he hung in there. He hung in there with a high pitch count, and he worked his way out of a number of jams. Only gave up the 1 run in 4 2/3 innings. And had he gotten that last batter, they probably would have left him in, and he would have been able to make it through 5. But they got him in. They actually took him out 1 batter too late because Asdrubal Cabrera was hitting 447 coming into the game against Zach Greinke. He had already ripped the ball down the line against him and did it again to get the Nationals close. That's my baseball take for the night. Again, sir, I don't want to mess up your handle. Don't want to mess it up. BISCOLOCO. But man, I appreciate the contribution here. This is amazing right here. Thank you so much for the contribution. Anytime you guys like the videos, I am asking that you please like the videos. That's the first thing I ask for. Then, yeah, comment. Share the videos out there on social media, and I hope you're subscribed here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, because we love the game that you love, and we deliver the content for the hardcore college football fan. And I say this all the time, and I'm half joking, but I'm half serious when I say we are here for the smart fan. And if you're not one of the smart fans, just stick around. You're still welcome. You're still invited. We will educate you. But from BISCOLOCO. I might be missing something there. I don't know. Thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it. If more people would catch the vision and say, hey, I'll give up a cup of coffee per month, and give to the channel. And man, 15,000. And we expect we gain about 1,000 subscribers per month. That's been our rate for several months now, gaining 1,000 subscribers per month. We should have over 17,000 going into 2020. That if we were able to bring in that type of revenue, and then we could just go crazy, and we would have all sorts of good stuff. And I've already built my list for the off season in regards to upgrades for the channel, meaning a better set, lighting. We really need to get on the other social media platforms and blow it out, like Facebook. Everybody go over to Facebook and look up Mark Rogers TV and just like the page. That would be phenomenal if you would do that as well. I'm going to cut a video here in the next few days, and I keep saying this, and I will get to it, in which I basically outline for everyone how you can contribute in so many ways to the channel and what we're trying to do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So thank you so much. BISCOLOCO. Dennis has his pick, Michigan 28, Notre Dame 24, which reminds me. All right, folks, keep in mind, I said Houston was going to win last night, or I said that they were going to cover. My apologies. I said SMU would win the game. I'm on record, Houston with the points, and anyone who has joined our Voice of College Football community knows this. They've got the picks. The pick tonight was USC wins, Colorado plus 13. So I'm 2-0 this week, both straight and against the points. And last week at 14-7 against the spread. That brings me to 102-75 this year against the spread. 58%. That is the goal every year. And actually, the lofty goal is 60% against the spread. I'm not a handicapper. I'm not an odds maker. I've just been watching tons of college football, as much as anybody, for a long, long time. And I've picked up a few tricks of the trade along the line. For example, if you take all the top 25 games in any given week, it's almost like clockwork. Almost like clockwork. Yes, there are weeks in which the number's a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but it's almost like clockwork. If you take all the top 25 games for the week, which means that some of the top 25 teams play each other, but most of them play unranked teams, there's usually about 20, 21, 22 top 25 games. And then I'll select some other games that are relevant games, but maybe both teams aren't ranked. A good example of that would be, I don't know, this week, but I grabbed a couple non-top 25 games. But let's say every week there's 20 to 25 top 25 type games. It's like clockwork. Just about 20% of those games are going to be upsets. Out of those 20 games, you better grab 4 as upsets. If you're a conservative type, if that's your natural bent to be conservative, then you're going to be like favorite. Oh, man, the favorite always looks good, almost always looks good. But no, you better find the 4 to 5 underdogs who are going to win each and every week. That's what we do. We find the 4 to 5 favorites or underdogs that pull through with the straight up win each week. Do I hit all of them? No, not anywhere close to all of them. But if you do the math, you understand that if we hit half of the underdogs that actually win the game outright, that's a winning proposition. That if you know anything about the lines in Vegas and the payouts in Vegas, you know that by virtual definition of being an underdog, the payout is greater than the investment. So follow me here. Let's say Ohio State's playing Michigan, and Ohio State's a 6-point favorite. And the payout on a $100 bet for Michigan to win outright, and this is probably a bad example because people are going to take it literally, the payout for Michigan winning as a 6-point underdog is probably about 140 on a $100 bet, meaning if you lay down $100 on Michigan and they win the game, you will net 140. So by virtual definition of making more money than you risked, substantially more money, You don't even need to hit 50% of those games. You need to hit about 40% of those games. Well, I hit way over that. And then against the spread, here's the deal against the spread. If you're looking to get into, and I don't recommend this, getting into betting, but if you're interested in it, that if you lay down a $100 bet on the typical college football or NFL game, your payoff, your net payment on a win is $91. It's 90% or 91%. $91 per 100 or 91 cents on the dollar. So if you put $100 on every game, you're going to lose that $100. If you miss the game, you're going to make 91. So you obviously have to produce more winners than losers. You can't break even by breaking even. You can't pick 50% right and expect to make money. You're going to lose money because you lose more for a loser than you win for a winner. It's 91 versus 100. But you need to hit about 53% to start to make money. So voila. 14-7 last week, 2-0 this week against the spread. That's making substantial money. So again, go to the description section of any of the videos down below. In any of the videos, the description section, go to the link, Voice of College Football Community. So this is so much more than getting predictions. This is not about getting my predictions because I'm so smart or I'm some kind of handicapper or odds maker. I'm not. I just know how to pick games fairly well. This is about joining the community. And what we offer there is, number one, the predictions. Number two is an exclusive live stream with you. An exclusive live stream with you each and every week per request. By request, you can request a live stream with me, and then we will publish that and post it on YouTube. So, for example, this week, we've got a guy by the name of Bo. Bo said, I want to do a live stream with you. So we've got it scheduled for this Tuesday, and you're going to see that right here on YouTube. The vision is that we have a weekly live stream with you, our Voice of College Football Community. You come on, we talk college football, we have a little round table. We get like 3 or 4 of you on at the same time. That would be awesome. Can you imagine? We got Eli, McD Sports 4, DeAndre, Navy Thomas, all on at the same time, and we're talking college football. We're mixing it up. That's the vision. I would love to do that once a week. And actually, I came up with that idea because of you. About 20 to 25 of you suggested that. And so boom, that's going to be one of the staples of the Voice of College Football Community on Patreon, is to do an exclusive live stream with you. The reason I haven't done it every week is because I'm not getting a request every week. But when I get a request, I fulfill the request. We've done about 8 or 9 of those. And I'm going to start to post those on YouTube so you guys can see exactly what we're doing. All right. And of course, as a number of people have seen tonight, the Super Chat is on. This is Mark Rogers TV, the Voice of College Football, and the voice is starting to fail me a little bit in this late night, but that's okay. The Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV. Back to the live chat, and keep in mind, there is the number, 860-325-3687. And maybe I'm staying up a little bit later tonight because I'm checking the time, not realizing that it's 2:22 a.m. Eastern time. That's my usual time zone, but I'm in the Central time zone this weekend. Number one ND fan, how many Big Ten West champions in recent history have 3 to 4 losses by the Big Ten title? They should have a chance at the playoffs. Okay. Well, you had Northwestern last year, had 4 losses in 2018. 2017, Wisconsin had 0 losses. 2016, Wisconsin had 2 losses. 2015, Iowa had 0 losses. 2014, Wisconsin had 2 losses. So, number one ND fan, your claim at this point isn't too valid. I get it. The Big Ten West is easy to pick on. but history, as I have just run down since 2014, is not backing up your point. It did last year with Northwestern, and their 4 losses going into the Big Ten championship game. But again, Wisconsin 0 in 2017, Wisconsin 2 in 2016, Iowa 0 in 2015, and Wisconsin 2 in 2014. And that's the history. Joseph, if Oregon wins out, they should be in the playoffs. They've lost 1 game. They lost to Auburn. They proved to be the better team for most of that game before they blew it in the 4th quarter. Lost fair and square, but outplayed Auburn for most of the game. So anytime somebody makes a statement like that, I just remind that particular person and remind all of you that you can't make these calls in a vacuum. If Oregon wins out, meaning they've got 1 loss, and they win one of the worst conferences, that would still be an amazing feat. It would be a remarkable accomplishment for the program, for this team, to go 13-1, or let's see, 12-1 after the Pac-12 championship game, 12-1, and be the Pac-12 champion with 1 non-conference loss to Auburn, neutral site, close game, down to the wire. But Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Alabama go undefeated. Why would Oregon be in the playoff? So you can't say that in a vacuum. You can't make claims like that and not give it context of the entire scenario. Herman, SEC and ACC like their current scheduling. Other 3 Power 5 need to complain, otherwise nothing will change. Okay. Herman is wanting 9 conference games, I believe, in the Power 5 across the board. I understand. I agree. Once we get to the offseason, so many of you just started watching me this college football season. So welcome aboard to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Love having you here. So once we get to the offseason, I address all this stuff. And I'll do it again this offseason. Scheduling, conference rankings, and I would really love to dive into history this year. That's kind of my thing. Sports history, college football history in particular. And we started a series last year and just didn't get enough views to keep it going. But what I did was I started with 2018 and I went 2017, 16, 15. I went back to like 2010 and I basically outlined how the playoff in the BCS has robbed us as fans and has robbed certain teams of not guaranteeing that they would have won the national championship, but they were robbed of the opportunity that they had. I went year by year by year and analyzed the teams under consideration, who was left out, and if they had a legitimate, meaning just as good a resume as some teams that were included. 2014, for example, I don't know why Alabama and Oregon were given this free pass into the playoff, while Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor had to earn it or had to be under consideration and scrutiny. Florida State, of course, went undefeated in 2014. Didn't prove to be that good, but they were undefeated, ACC champs. But TCU and Baylor, their resume was just as good as Ohio State's, but they were left out. So I put into context those teams that were left out. 2015, Ohio State could have been there. 2016, Penn State could have been there. 2017, Ohio State could have been there. And I'm missing other teams, UCF. But we went year by year by year, and I really enjoy that kind of stuff to talk about, just to provide a bigger picture look at the college football landscape, the championship structure, the flaws, and give some recognition to those teams that were robbed, that had just as good a resume as the teams that were selected. Oklahoma State, a classic example in 2011. I remember walking into work the day after it was announced. Alabama, Alabama, LSU in 2011, people came up to me and said, who should be in the BCS championship game? And I said, LSU and Oklahoma State. And they said, a number of people, you think they're the two best teams in the country? And I said, no, that's not what I said. You asked me who should be in the BCS championship game. And I'm telling you, LSU won the SEC. Oklahoma State won the Big 12, and they are the only two one-loss conference champions in college football. So they should be playing for the national championship under this system. But if I was going to put my mortgage on the line, who are the two best teams in the country in 2011? Alabama and LSU. So there's a difference. But based on the system, they should not have been allowed to play again. So Oklahoma State was robbed that year. And there's so many examples of it. Any year, I can clearly make an argument for teams that were left out of the playoff or out of the BCS championship game that had just as strong a credentials as teams that were included. So I started on that rampage because I was talking about off-season content. All right. I am at 1:18 on the comments Central Time, so I'm about 12 minutes behind. I'll get there. Eli, good for you. You're smart. You're a smart man. Hey, Joseph, thank you so much for the contribution. Just thanks for jumping online and acknowledging that we're here and we are trying our best to provide the very best in college football content. Joseph, thank you. Yes, it does, Eli. All right. Number one ND fan. How many years have there been 4 undefeated times? What? Undefeated times in a college football season. Oh, undefeated teams. 3 last year, surprising and unexpected. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often at all. Yeah. In 2018, there were those 3. 2017, we had basically, who was number 1? Clemson. And they lost, right? They lost to Syracuse. So we had none. UCF, if you count 1. Count them in the group of 5. And we can go through it. Yeah. I'm not going to go through it. It would just be easy for me to go through it and let you know that, yes, it doesn't happen. Eli, I agree. Think I caught up. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please enjoy your college football weekend. We will be here at some point on Saturday. I appreciate the support. Like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. But thank you so much for all that you do in keeping us going. And going into next week, we will preview just a glut of games. Believe me, all the big games, all the big matchups, we will provide our previews. Get the predictions. And not just the predictions. Again, the voice of college football community. You can jump online with me each and every week directly, talk college football, and join our community. And in addition to that, get just some buy-in. Get the engagement that you will have with me. And I enjoy and love your recommendations for content. College football, Jared, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Number 1 ND fan. I really wish there was a Big Ten ACC challenge in college football like basketball. Yeah, so from an entertainment standpoint and being able to judge those 2 conferences, I love it too. Like if we had the Big Ten and the ACC playing or the Big Ten and the SEC and we just went 1 through 14 and there was a week 1 of the season. We had Ohio State and Alabama, Penn State and Florida, and on all the way down the line. that would be fun to watch. It would tell us a lot. It would give us a great measuring stick, but it wouldn't provide equitable scheduling. Because think about that. If we had the SEC and the Big Ten, for example, well, then they would not be playing any other leagues. So believe me, it just wouldn't be equitable. It's fun to think about, but it needs to be a little bit more diverse than that. The distribution needs to cover all the Power Five. You can't just say the ACC is going to play the Big 12 this year and the SEC is going to play the Big 10, and, well, who does the ACC play? Nobody. And it doesn't work for a number of reasons, but there you go. Number one Indy fan, rain in Wisconsin, Ohio State game really aids Wisconsin, takes away the speed advantage, and takes the home crowd out of it. Agreed. I will take the Wisconsin Badgers and 14.5. All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the college football. I may be back here, I believe, at some point in the afternoon tomorrow. Will probably be not a late night or prime time live stream for you, but I believe I can jump on after Ohio State and Wisconsin. We'll see you very soon right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.